I have a beef with 1/1 counters. And I have this beef because I think this mechanic is ruining some of the coolest commanders that have been printed in recent years, and is to a degree damaging Commander as a whole. In this video, I'm going to talk about why I think these counters are a problem, how they're ruining otherwise amazing commanders, and I'm going to share how I think that Magic's game designers, or maybe even you and I, can change these cards to help make things better. But first we need to start at the beginning. In March of 2024, the Fallout Magic set was released. Despite having played Fallout, I wasn't that excited about the set because most of the lore went over my head. I did, however, pick up a Mutant Menace precon, because I was very excited to use the Mothman and the surrounding precon as a base for a Sultai Graveyard Matter-sized hole in my deck collection. I got the precon and then theory crafted all kinds of upgrades and additions. I ordered the cards, then eagerly ripped them open on mail day to assemble what would be my own personal shrine to all things mill. Then came the big moment I'd been waiting for. We managed to get all the boys together in one place, we had food, we had beer, and I was finally going to get to revel in all my mill shenanigans. Except that's not what happened. Game after game with my shiny new Mothman deck, it wasn't the mill that posed the problem to my opponents, nor was it the life loss from my shiny new radiation counters. Hell, it wasn't even an abomination resurrected from my graveyard or a looks-maxing mutant empowered by a stack of 1/1 counters. The real threat in my deck was my accidental Voltron commander. Now I'll crash out about Mothman's design and all the ways that he betrayed me in just a minute, but needless to say, I was not overjoyed that despite my best deck brewing attempts, the Omega level Voltron threat presented by my commander forced a rather one-dimensional kill or be killed game plan. I would actively have to kneecap my commander not to be that threat, and if I didn't, no matter how much I'd sell the table the idea that I just wanted to mill stuff, their removal spells would unsurprisingly find their target in a 15/15 flying commander damage machine. First really noticed this problem with the Mothman, but as I pulled on that thread, I realized this was not a problem unique to him. There are many other cards with interesting designs that are stifled or ruined by ham-fisted 1/1 counter mechanics. Commanders like Vivi, Valgavoth, Baylen, and many more are all weighed down by unnecessary 1/1 counter synergies. At best, these 1/1 counters just get in the way, but at worst, they pigeonhole you into playing these cards in one way and one way only, regardless of how you actually built your deck. The play pattern is, in the words of Thanos, inevitable, and far too often that inevitable play pattern is oops, surprise Voltron. And this sucks because many casual players don't love commander damage at the best of times. But far more importantly, it also sucks because it does the good design on these cards a huge disservice. Essentially relegating all the cool, interesting stuff to the backseat and making Commander a less diverse and less fun experience because of it. I am a big advocate for crafting a Commander deck to offer a fairly unique experience to you and the people that you sit down to play with, and I don't want multiple decks in my collection that all essentially do the same thing, especially if that wasn't my intention when I built those decks. One could argue that we can easily just ignore the pesky 1/1 counters, but some of these cards don't give us that choice, and even if we do, like I experienced with the Mothman, the cards are just vastly underpowered if we do that. Whether we like it or not, the average power level of the commander format has risen significantly, and even in bracket 2, we can't just throw 100 random cards in a commander deck or intentionally power down our deck and expect to have a great time. What I definitely don't want to do is to spend time hypothesizing on why these cards have been designed this way, because whenever I've been on the inside of similar decisions, the speculation on the outside, in this case me, is always very wrong. Instead, what I do want to do is to try and fix some of these cards by coming up with fresh ideas or alternative design direction that celebrates their unique abilities. I'm sure my suggestions won't be perfect, but these are merely meant to open up a conversation about how these cards and other similar cards could be better. As a fun minigame, here are the cards that I'm going to tinker with, and if you like, you can pause the video and have a think about which direction you'd have taken these cards, and then compare them to my ideas. I would love to hear your opinions and thoughts down in the comments. And while you're down there, like the video to tell the algorithm that you think it's good, and subscribe to help me in my quest to reach 100,000 subscribers. Whether it's the YouTube view apocalypse, the rapture, or the impending alien attack, times out there are really tough, so any support to appease the algorithm gods will go a really long way and is highly appreciated. Not to mention that you'll make sure that my next banger gets delivered directly into your eyeballs. Okay, time to get our game design hats on and try to cook up some real banger commanders, starting with Gwen Stacy or the Ghost Spider. When I look at Gwen, I immediately want to build a deck that is all about playing things from exile. Whether that deck wins by powering through our library with our Impulse Draw to enable a combo style win, or we're going after Storm shenanigans, or we're simply trying to use cards like Passionate Archaeologist to burninate our opponents, the mechanics of adding counters when we play a spell, and then being able to remove those counters to get more Impulse Draw is very cool. The problem, however, is that we only need to play at most 7 cards from exile, which won't be particularly hard, and then we have a 2-hit Voltron kill on an opponent. This will almost certainly be far easier to achieve than almost any other viable win condition available. The fact that she has baked-in evasion and no downside for turning sideways makes this even worse. What if these were not 1/1 counters, but energy counters instead? This would obviously immediately solve our Voltron issue, and incentivize us to use our counters for their intended purpose, the Impulse Draw. Additionally, this would open up a whole bunch of cool synergy and shenanigans in the energy theme, which I think really needs more support as the commander options there are pretty limited. Next up, let's look at Eshki Dragonclaw. When I look at Eshki, I see a really cool commander. It wants us to both cast a creature and a non-creature spell before combat. That's a pretty fun and rarely seen play pattern. And what do we get if we do that? We get a card. Absolute banger. But oh wait, there it is. We also get to put 2 1/1 counters on our Vigilant, Trampling, and Warded commander. Oh dear. It takes just 3 turns of doing what she incentivizes us to do, and the table has a game-ending Voltron threat on its hands. A really simple fix here would be that Eshki can only put counters on other creatures. What's probably far more interesting though would be drawing a card and then being able to give a creature haste and a short-term buff like +3/+3. This would incentivize an aggro playstyle focused around the creatures we're incentivized to play to begin with. I'll stop there, but I think there are so many other interesting directions one can take Eshki's abilities that don't involve slapping 2 1/1 counters on her. Let's talk about Vivi. Now I know most of us are sick of hearing about them, and I think that's valid, but this is a real why on earth are there 1/1 counters strapped to this creature situation. Vivi's general design is power crept as hell and slightly questionable, but in terms of play pattern, I'm a big fan of the mana generation and the pinging on spellcast. It gives a really strong direction for what we want to do. Cast lots of spells, and profit. So why does Vivi also suddenly need to be able to beat up an Eldrazi in combat? To me, Vivi being frail is a great way to balance these otherwise powerful abilities because dying to a lightning bolt is pretty balanced. They are a small mage after all. I'm going to lean into energy again here as a solution, because to me that seems far more in theme for a wizard when they're spell slinging. There may be ways to abuse that, but spending energy would also reduce our ability to produce mana, so it's an interesting trade-off here. On the flip side, if we didn't go with energy, perhaps Vivi could have a card draw ability. Like if this is the 3rd time this ability has resolved this turn, we draw a card. That would be a great way to further that spell-slinging fantasy. From one spell slinger to another, let's look at Calamax. Now I don't think most people are out here actively building a Voltron Calamax, but I do think this is another prime example of where the 1/1 counter design goes wrong. I would argue that Calamax doesn't need the line about 1/1 counters to begin with, and that his copy ability is already more than strong enough. If, however, as a designer, we are concerned because we believe that he should be attacking to allow for his trigger, then why not give him something like an on-cast ability that gives him indestructible or prevents all combat damage to him until the end of the turn? There would be no downside for attacking, but also no oops, Calamax is a 12/12, you better block him or you die situation. And that would also mean that there's more chance Calamax gets killed for the threat he actually is, rather than a perceived combat threat. Valgavoth is literally the most popular Rakdos commander out there at the moment. So isn't it a pity that our boy is also a victim of the surprise Voltron affliction? If you go and look at the pre-con list, you'll see a deck list that wants to deal all kinds of non-combat damage and profit off of it. So why is the card incentivizing us to use a commander as a 15/15 flying beatstick? Now don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Valgavoth's main ability. Whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, we get to draw a card. That's such an interesting play pattern, especially in Rakdos colors. But oh wait, there it is. Valgavoth also gets a 1/1 counter, and oh yes, they have flying, which facilitates the classic accidental Voltron recipe. No matter how we set it up, few win conditions in our deck will be remotely as strong or reliable as Valgavoth's built-in commander damage. And that to me is just a huge waste. What if, instead of a 1/1 counter, Valgavoth pinged each opponent for some more damage? You know, in line with the primary thing that we came to do. Or perhaps Valgavoth could allow us to return a creature from our graveyard to our hand. Or perhaps they could allow us to cast spells from opponents' graveyards. There are so many interesting directions that we could go with him that again don't rely on 1/1 counters. From the scariest of demons to the cutest of bunnies, Baylen the Battle Bunny is an absolute banger. giving go-wide token boards far more utility than simply being fodder for an impending Crater Hoof Behemoth or Overrun. We get to tap 2 tokens to add some mana, we get to tap 3 tokens to draw a card, and we get to tap 4 tokens to, for fuck's sakes, put 3 counters on Baylen and give them trample. It vexes me to no end that a card that so deeply encourages a wide board and token strategy pushes us so heavily into a go tall commander strategy. Baylen would be so much more interesting if at the very least those counters went on another target creature. Or better yet, what about a 1/1 counter on all other creatures instead, given how we're encouraged to build a wide board to begin with? What about all token creatures getting +2/+2 and trample until the end of the turn? I do think a pump effect is a good final ability for Baylen, but not in the form it currently takes. From one rabbit to another, let's look at Miss Bumbleflower. Now, you didn't think that the People's Princess of Bloomborough, Miss Bumblebussy herself, would escape catching these hands, did you? Memes aside, I actually don't hate the counter synergy on Miss Bumbleflower, but I do think she'd be improved dramatically by simply not allowing her to put those counters on herself. Because how often is it going to be optimal to put those 2 counters on a creature that's not your vigilant and soon to be flying commander damage machine? I think the answer is very rarely. There are plenty of other offenders that to some extent suffer from this problem, but I'll finish my examples on the card that was the catalyst that made me think about making this video to begin with. The Mothman. Ah, my sweet wispy-winged prince. As promised, I've saved the biggest crash out till last. As could be expected for a moth, the Mothman has flying, and whenever he enters or attacks, each player gets a rad counter. Rad counters mill cards, and whenever one or more non-land cards are milled, we put a 1/1 counter on each of up to X target creatures, where X is the number of non-land cards milled this way. Now in the Mothman's defense, we have the ability to put those counters on other creatures, but the immediate issue this creates is that regardless of what you have in play, putting counters on the Mothman is almost always the objective correct play. And this is partly because often the counters will just go to waste if you don't. This creates a moment where you, the person that absolutely fucking loves whimsy and wants to build creative decks, dies a little bit inside every time you have to make this choice. The exact moment that should spark a hit of dopamine for you from your deck doing the thing is instead creating a moment of dread. Do you do the cool, interesting thing by putting the counters elsewhere or on nothing at all, only to get outpaced by the table, or do you put the counters on the Mothman and die a little bit inside when you do? Despite my best intentions, games with this deck were decided by a big Mothman far more often than not. The Mothman would immediately be better if he could not put the counters on himself. But then I ask, why is he putting 1/1 counters on anything to begin with? The interesting part of the Mothman is his rad counter effect, so why have we not simply doubled down on that ability? In playing the Mothman, it always felt to me like his rad trigger was too weak. Rather than a single rad counter, the trigger should probably create 2 or even 3 rad counters. Or what if when the Mothman attacks, the defending player gets X rad counters, where X is the amount of cards put into our graveyard this turn? That would be truly cooking. Alternatively, what if we had to keep the rad trigger the same, but instead of adding 1/1 counters, whenever cards are milled from rad counters, we get to draw a card? Or perhaps, whenever a player loses life from milling cards, they instead lose some more life instead. There are plenty of synergistic and interesting ways that the Mothman could lean much more heavily into that which makes him interesting, and that's not 1/1 counters. Whilst there are almost certainly plenty of flaws with my back of a napkin card design, I hope I've highlighted and perhaps convinced you that most of these cards would be far more fun and possibly better if they had mechanics printed on them that were not reliant on 1/1 counters. Whether it's a go-wide mechanic or a direct damage mechanic, or a different type of counter, like energy, there are so many ways that these cards can be more interesting, more thematic, and less repetitive. Obviously, Magic's card designers hold the most power to change this, but perhaps you and I can and should be responsibly rule zeroing some of our favorite cards to change up their abilities to make them properly live up to their potential. I say all of this not to dunk on Magic's game designers. For the most part, they're fantastic at what they do, and I know there'll be plenty of very good reasons why things are the way that they are. And were I in their shoes, I doubt I'd do an objectively better job. They churn out so many fantastic commanders, and while my gripes are only with a few, I don't believe that makes my gripes any less valid. Instead, this is an appeal to any of them that see this to be cautious with their 1/1 counter trigger finger on legendary creatures. Because I subjectively think it'll make for a far healthier and more fun canvas on which we paint our commander decks. And of course, there should be some commanders that are heavily focused around 1/1 counters, even if those counters are placed on that creature itself, but make those intentional choices rather than seemingly accidental ones. Most importantly, This is a conversation starter and it appealed to you to see whether it's just me that feels this way or whether you have similar thoughts. So, I would love to be showered with your opinions down in the comments. What do you think of my beef with 1/1 counters, and which other accidental Voltron commanders have you run into? And how would you tweak them, or the ones that I've mentioned, to be better, more fun, and more interesting cards? Last but not least, this isn't my normal type of content, so if you like this, be sure to let me know in the comments so I don't make this a once-off. If you want to have similar based conversations about Magic, or perhaps play some Commander, or perhaps submit your decks for my Deck Tech series, come and hang out in the best Commander community on the internet in the Base Deck Department Discord. And if you want more of the Froge, or you just want to support me because the Rapture and the aliens are coming, and money is soon to be worthless, you can find that on Patreon or Ko-fi. And if you want me to help you fix your favorite Commander deck, or help you build a Commander deck from scratch, I also offer that over on Ko-fi too. If you enjoyed this, you will probably also like one of these videos, and you should go and watch them. And as always, thank you for being here.